right, well, welcome back one more time. This is the second video in Module 3 where we talk about the cross-cutting concepts. And so as we think about those, this time I want to go into how do we prompt that thinking? What can a teacher do to kind of push students in that direction? And there's some pretty specific things we can do to kind of make that thinking and value that thinking in a student's head. And I'm specifically going to focus in on asking questions. Okay, because the more we model questions, the type of questions we want students to ask, and I want students asking questions about these concepts. I want a student to walk in and go, is that a system? Oh, I think I see equilibrium there. I think I see a pattern here. Those are the kind of questions that scientists actually dive into that help them solve those problems. Can they see a pattern? Because if there's a pattern, I can fix it, or I can adjust it, or I can change it. Okay. And so what I've laid out here is, okay, that we're going to have to change the input a little bit. Okay. If I'm not necessarily interested, if the only thing I'm asking for is for my students to tell me about the periodic table, I'm not going to get the questions I want. Okay, so I need to change my input to encourage this, and then I might see some questions come out on the other side, which is really my goal. Okay, and so we're going to teach them, we want to let them engage and explore. And so rather than diving right into explaining, this is kind of a shift that I'll talk about in Module 4, okay, is the idea that to encourage cross-cutting concepts, we need to shift our thinking from I'm the presenter of information to I want to draw some understanding out of my students. I want them to generate questions. And maybe I even start by presenting them with things that are, not necessarily clear. We let them explore before we explain. That's a key concept of STEM teaching. Okay. And so open-ended questions are really where we want to live. Back in Module 2, I talked about, kind of the difference between, what is the molecular weight of a substance versus a question, why does molecular weight change and is it important? Two totally different questions. We want to get students going into the why, the what if, and the how. Okay. And if they'll live there, then we're likely to generate the kind of questions that we want. Okay. And so these are some sets of questions that I've pulled from some NGS materials that'll lead to students to think about cause and effect. And so you might consider, rather than if you are in a mode of teaching and it's like, it's time to ask a question, questions like this. What do you predict would happen if this happened? What caused the patterns that you're seeing? How do you know that blank caused blank? Does the fact that something happened after that mean it always causes it? Why or why not? How can you test whether blank caused blank? Okay, those are the kind of questions that get our students thinking about cause and effect, and you could guide them if they were doing their models or doing any other of those. Okay, that could be the basis of a conversation, a presentation. I want you to present on this. Okay, so next, energy and matter. What are the questions that lead to that? Well, where in the system are energy changes occurring? What's happening to the energy in this system? Where is it going? Where's it coming from? Okay, what forms of energy are involved in this system? Is it kinetic energy, potential energy? Is it transferring? Is it heat energy? Okay, where does the blank get its energy? Where did I saw that thing move. How did it move? I saw it change color. How did that happen? Okay, are there atoms and molecules involved in this? And if so, how do you know? What's happening with them? And what evidence is there that matter is conserved in this cycle? That whole idea of conservation of matter, conservation of energy. Okay, how it didn't come out of nowhere. Where did it come from? Getting students to think systemically about energy and matter. Okay, what about patterns? Well, obviously, what patterns do you see? But give them some data and just throw it at them. What do you see here? Okay, look at the patterns of the moon. What's going on there? What are patterns of people's faces, patterns of anything, patterns of numbers, patterns of smell, patterns of color. Okay? What are some similarities and differences you see between things? How would you classify and group these? Okay, are these all the same? Why do you think all the mammals are there, and what's the characteristic? That's looking for patterns. How is something changing over time? Is there a pattern to that change over time? What mathematical function fits the pattern of the data? Could we model this? So much of our thinking now, you hear about, well, the computer model predicted this, this, and this. How did they even do that? Is it a linear equation? Is it a quadratic equation? Suddenly those mathematical equations have meaning. And what observations could help explain the patterns in the data? Those are the kind of questions we want to ask, keeping in mind our job isn't to give them the answer. Our job is to guide them then to use the skills to show us their understanding. Okay, scale and proportion. What's the scale of this model? Okay, is it bigger, smaller? Is it half size, triple size, quadruple size? How small or large is that thing really? What is a decade? What is an eon? How long ago was the Paleocene? What's the proportion of this that are that? You got this group. Is it 10%, 20%? What does that even mean? Okay, what equation could be used to express this relationship? How could we measure it? Can we measure time, distance, volume? Suddenly those numbers have purpose, and you can see that we've got to transfer those numbers around, and you get into scale factors. How do you know if it's happening quickly or slowly? And we can talk about rate equations. Okay, stability and change. Okay, why are things staying the same? How fast do they change? Do they change? Is it stable? Is it unstable? And what's causing that? Okay, how do you design a system to be more stable? Could you fix that? If a population is unstable and we're talking natural selection, are there some things we could do in the food web to adjust that? Should we do it? What would be the unintended consequences of that? Would we destabilize it more, or would we stabilize it? And how might the system be affected by this, that, or the other? I love Jenga for the metaphor of that. It's really starting to get them thinking in terms of, stability and change in systems. Structure and function. Okay, what are the pieces of an eyeball? What does the lens do? Why is it shaped the way it is? Why isn't it square? Why is it round? What do the muscles do? What's the shape of it have to do with its function? Okay, you can think about gears and connections and interrelationships. How do all those pieces of our eye work together that I see something? Okay, and are there other designs that could do the same thing? Okay, if your hearing's lost in that system, is there something called a cochlear implant, and how could that possibly work? Okay, you got to understand sound. It's a complex understanding of structure, function of things, especially if we're going to replace it with something. And then lastly, systems. Okay, how do the different systems of this work together? What would happen to this system if you made this bigger, this smaller, change this? Are there feedback loops? Is somehow that keeping the system stable? Okay, and this can be any system. It could be a political system. It could be a governmental system. Does energy come into the system, out of the system? Maybe we're talking food webs. Can you draw me a picture? Can you draw me a model, how it works? And are there subsystems? Are there little subroutines going on? Suddenly we're into computer thinking, because systems and programming is all about subsystems. So you have a program that does something, but maybe you have a subroutine going there. Okay? So those are the basic ideas of the cross-cutting concepts. And hopefully you now have some ideas, not only what they are and their importance, but how you could actually activate them and use them in your classes. Okay? And so, again, going back to, what should we be doing with our skills? We should be doing cross-cutting concepts. Okay? I'm going to take you back here one more time, because I hope you're seeing a pattern. I hope you're seeing that I really want you thinking about these things and applying them. So let me take you back here. Is there anything you see now that you look at and go, I see why you did that. I see where that kind of ties in now. And I never noticed that before. Every time we return to something like this, you have made a new neuron connection. It's called learning. All right. And so I hope you're learning about STEM. Continue through module 3, and we will continue. Now I'm going to talk about how you put it all together. What does a unit look like? What does a lesson look like? Because there's a specific flow that we find and research says is going to work. And then we'll come back and talk about a little bit of English on top of it. Okay, so if you'd like to continue, you know where to find it. All right, thanks.